in the water, we have a certain amount of frontal surface of the hull. So if we just only look to the front of the boat, like the actual bow will be here. You look at the boat, this is your frontal surface which goes through the water. Let's say if we trim the boat really far forward, that means like the whole boat, like flat in the water. If we trim the boat further forward, we get more frontal surface. The surface goes from there to there instead of I draw it in extremes, but just to give you the idea of if you trim it far forward, you create more frontal surface. Same goes for if you trim it far backwards. If you sit too far backwards, the boat also goes like this to the water, so the water is actually facing more frontal surface and therefore more resistance. Therefore your boat has a natural, if you try to balance the boat to its right flow design. And those designers sit hours and hours behind their computers to get these boats right in the right shape, and if we put them wrong in the water, we don't do any good to their brilliant ideas. And to our big investments. If there are any questions, please feel free to speak up.
I actually have a question. No, it's a good one, because yesterday I was on the boat with him, and there's been times that we've had to sit really far forward or not sit really far forward. And I'm a dinghy sailor in my nature, and sometimes we sit extremely far forward in dinghies as well as big boats. And I definitely agree yesterday, even when I was steering, he had me sitting further back than I was ready for. Why do you think in the catamaran it might be better to keep it flat? Because you're not technically getting the stern out of the water when you're sitting forward, when in such light conditions. Like, why do you think in some boats that you should sit really far forward? You know, we all talk about that, but then I agree yesterday, it felt much better to keep it flat rather than too far forward.
Too far forward, like we kept the transom out of the water.
Yeah, we kept it relatively forward, but not crazy. You know, it wasn't, and I think some people might take that to
What's
new
crazy?
level.
Where were you sitting?
No, it's sometimes like no, we weren't sitting crazy forward. We were sitting just a little bit forward. Not.
Where were you sitting?
I was sitting
Let's say like
just in front of the
dinghies,
beam.
Like we were balancing the boat flat. But I can see in dinghies what happens, the hull shape is so wide
Yeah.
and quite long. The transom is a fat part
Yeah.
of most of those boats. So by sitting really far forward, you're reducing wetted surface,
Yeah.
which is helping more with those boats than the actual frontal projection.
Yeah.
But therefore it works in some of those boats, that works better. But we are so narrow with our hull designs that we're keeping it plain.
So I just want to make sure I understand, when you say you're keeping the bow flat, does that mean, as far as being able to visually understand that, does that mean the water line is exiting the transom just shy of the transom?
Yeah, that's what I like to see as like flat. And that's where you start losing the sucking sound.
So you're saying you go forward until you achieve that?
That's one. And it could also be if you see that your platform is actually sunk in a little bit on the leeward side, which is also creating that sucking sound. And the platform is not fully flat, but it lays a little bit deep. That's where I start to trapeze to counterbalance that.
Right.
And to reduce the drag on that way.
How close together are you guys sitting? As far as like, are you trying to be right next to each other to stay in that one?
That's a really good question as well, because how close do you want to sit together, and why do you sit so close together actually on the boat? Yeah, for the rocking, and that depends on the waves. If the waves are really short and steep, and your boat starts to hit those waves.
That's about right for yesterday.
That was about. That's how it felt, eh? Awful. But a boat, if you sit backwards, you create a little bit of a hoo horse on the boat. But your boat starts to bounce in a certain rhythm. as well, in a certain sinus, like a certain wave pattern as well. What you try to do with your wave is to find that counter rhythm to the waves, so that the boat starts to go straight. And sometimes that means that you sit perfectly together, and sometimes it means further apart is actually better to get the counterbalance with those waves. Like yesterday, we felt sitting really close in one line was good. And if the waves would get a little bit more further apart, you would try to sit further apart. How to find the right answer? We just try. Like if we sit really close together, it's not working. We try to sit further apart, and we find now the boat's going less hobby horse through the water, so we find the right spot.
How does your main sheet tension change as the boat starts to hobby horse back and forth?
Yeah, well, if the boat starts to hobby horse, that means for me two things. I need to like stabilize the boat, because if the platform starts to do this, it means that the rig up there is doing this. And if the rig starts to do this, it's not creating as much power as it could be. So I'd rather have the platform stable, and getting the platform stable, you can do it by trying to get a little bit more pressure on the boat. So bear away, ease the sails a little bit more, and sail more power in the boat. That's another thing we'll maybe see on the tracks as well, but we were definitely sailing a lower angle than the rest of the fleet, I thought, yesterday, and we sailed more power and punched through the waves, just because those waves were really gnarly and they were stopping the boat all the time. So it was every time you hit a wave, it was a stop and go penalty. The boat only accelerates if you're a little bit off the breeze. If you're pinching, the boats get really stopped. And pinching most of the time you got very tightly sheeted sails.
You've been talking of where you smoked was down.
Yeah. We'll come to the downwind. The downwind is more getting around the mark in decent pressure. Makes you go fast, and there was nothing special of us sailing downwind. It was
Yeah,
Just 2 or
right.
3 knots in the woods.
and riding waves. There were a lot of waves to.
When you talk about balancing the boat, are you talking about from the shrouds? Like, do you consider that the center of the boat, or do you consider the balance point at the beam?
The balance point of your boat only means that your transom is what you already said, like it's just skimming the water. So your balance point in the boat means like it's not one answer for one boat, because we show so different boats. It's like you want to get that sucking noise out of the boat. It means like you start to balance the boat, that sound is gone. And most of the designs are that correct, that the transom just skimming the water means that the boat is in the way it is designed.
It seems like as you're going through the chop here, that water actually in the transom is going to move forward and back.
Yeah.
And then what you're really talking about is there's some line between the bow and the transom, some plane that you're trying to keep consistent, so you're not hobby horsing.
Yeah.
Because as you're going through chop, you can't keep the exit of the water consistent. Otherwise, you are hobby horsing, right?
Yeah. For sure. For sure. But there, like the biggest thing is that if it sinks in, that it sinks less in than it should be. Let's say if we both sit really far in the back, the boat would suck all the time. And if we sit really far forward, every wave we would stick the bow in. So therefore you try to keep it in a flat plane and try to do it as good as possible. Like now, it will be very easy to find the right point on the boat.
Find the boat.
So would you do that in heavier as well? Try and keep the transom just out of the water?
'Cause that's the other question. As soon as we start to lift the hull, the buoyancy of the actual hull is not enough to keep the transom out. Otherwise, you have to stand really far forward, which most likely will make the boat pitch ball. And The boats have they have about 650 liters of buoyancy per hull, so they will definitely sink in on a little bit when you're. You can see on the pictures that the hull is almost, especially on the outside, it's almost touching the front beam on the outside. So you can never do that, but then the driving force of the breeze is so much that that's how it is.